how do the folks in an office like yours, in the State Department, White House, thinking about these issues, lay out the priorities for where to get involved, where not to get involved, how deeply to get involved, when to take the lead on getting involved, when to try to get others, whether it's the Europeans or whether, in the case of African conflicts, whether it's African countries that can try to do more to help situations in their own neighborhood. How do you manage that full set?
Well, there's a whole set of elements that go into that equation and into trying to figure this out, because you're absolutely right. Today we're looking at Ukraine as the crisis of the moment, but all those other crises that exist are still there, and you're still trying to address them. You're still trying to play a role as the U.S. in addressing them. Right. So being able to carry all this out then meant also that you had to find different ways of interacting. You could form partnerships with other countries, and depending on the issue, there were countries in Europe that were very intent. France, certainly in Francophone Africa, would play an important role. Norway was particularly interested in countries like Indonesia or some other countries, so that you could really work closely together in a way that you could then leverage each other. You could also bring in, interestingly, the private sector in a way that the Department of State had not done. So you could engage multinational corporations. You could engage companies that were particularly interested in given topics, extractive industries and others, that could really help facilitate some of these issues.
How would we go about doing that, and what are the prospects for alleviating some of the suffering that's taking place?
Well, for starters, we are doing an enormous amount in that already. But, in Syria, just to say a couple of words, I worked on Syria from the very beginning. When the Friends of Syria were formed, which was about 70 countries that met right when the crisis started, and where we were trying to help the opposition to Assad become more coherent and be able to develop a unified voice with unified leadership. That has never happened, as you well know. And that, from my perspective, is the major reason that we were really unable to help Syria move to a point in which you could resolve the issues without the kind of bloodshed and tragedy that you have now. And to date, there is really still no Syrian opposition that you can name, and there is no mechanism where internally the country can address the issue. So that, and I don't see that changing. In fact, as we see more extreme groups coming into that open space, it's more and more difficult to think that we're going to be able to resolve it.
And what about one thing that you wished you'd had more time to address that you hope will get addressed?
I wish this reorganization of the department had happened earlier when I was there, and I could have consolidated it more, brought more coherence to the way it was working, incorporated it more into the way in which the department was operating. And engaged it more closely with the work that we do in development. And that, I hope, can continue.